Rod Kuckro is one of the most respected and best energy reporters in Washington. He writes for an organization called E&E Publishing. Rod, welcome to the broadcast. You've been looking at the energy industry for a long time, at electricity in particular. Suddenly it's shifting. It was very static and now it's moving. What's going on?
I like the fact you used the word static. That's a nice pun on what's been going on in the industry. Now it's a dynamic change going on, Llewellyn. We've talked about this before, but in the past year since we last spoke on your program, so much more has happened than I think would have been predicted. What I'm talking about chiefly is the acceleration of utility adoption and acceptance of renewable energy as a serious investment. There are a couple examples of that. One is the price. The price of the technologies, both wind turbines and solar panels, have come down at a rate that no one could have predicted 5 or 10 years ago, to the point where utilities are now, their first choice when they build new generation is not a coal plant, obviously, or even a gas plant. It's a renewable energy facility. One reason is the fuel is free. The fuel is free forever. And it's dawning upon companies like Southern Company and others in that large sphere of integrated utilities that operate in multiple states, that they can sign 20 or 30-year agreements for power at prices that are unheard of from, say, a fossil fuel plant. Just recently in Georgia, a power purchase agreement was approved for a large utility-scale solar farm for 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, the average rate paid in America for a kilowatt hour by residential customer is about 11 or 12 cents. So they're buying that power at half the retail rate. They can't do that with a plant where they have to actually go out there and buy the coal or buy the natural gas, because these plants have no fuel costs. But the other great breakthrough has been that Southern Company, who I mentioned already, did something rather groundbreaking about 2 weeks ago. At their annual meeting, their CEO, Tom Fanning, announced that Georgia Power, an electric utility, was going to throw down the gauntlet to the companies that have been doing solar power, third-party solar like Solar City and First Solar and Sunrun, and he was going to do that business himself. In other words, if one of his customers, a residential customer, wants to have rooftop solar, he's going to sell them a panel. And beginning July 1st, that business will be live for Georgia Power.
That seems a self-obvious solution. Why didn't the utilities take that route earlier? They wouldn't have the problem with these competitors.
Well, I think it's fear. I mean, there's no doubt that in the states where some companies like Solar City are allowed to operate, and they're not allowed to operate in most states by state law, they have been taking away market share from utilities. And I think executives have seen that, and they've just been scared, unwilling to think about the potential of what if I do that myself. The reality is that most people who put rooftop solar on their home don't do it to try to provide 100% of their power. They don't want to be an island. They do it for all kinds of reasons. They want to be green, they want to cut down the carbon footprint, maybe they want to even save some money, but they tend to maybe take half their power from the sun or a wind turbine and the rest from the utility. The sweet spot for the utility that gets into the solar business has to be, how do we adjust our rates so we continue to make enough money to pay for the maintenance of the grid for all those people who have no solar power? And that's part of the debate going on right now in the industry, is what's the price point?
Companies like Sun City have been joined by Google. Google is a name that conjures all kinds of expertise, resources. What is Google doing in the electric space?
Well, one thing Google's doing, along with some other very large users of internet capacity like Facebook, is they're building large data centers. More and more, of course, as they get more customers and they offer more services, they're saving a lot of your data, your photographs, your music, your conversations with your friends and family. And they're building data centers all over the United States to house that information. And they have chosen the path where they're willing to pay a premium for their electricity so that those data centers are powered by sun or wind when possible. So they are driving that trend, and it's no surprise that these utilities, when they see the most successful companies in America, those with the highest stock prices, the most attraction to Wall Street, saying, we're willing to pay a premium for our power because we want it to come from the sun, because we care about carbon, that's a wake-up call to the utilities.
That is the value added that they can offer, is that it's green. Once upon a time, I ran a conference on value added in electric utilities, and the only thing they really came up with, and there wasn't much of it in those days, was environmentally friendly generation, green. Why don't they include nuclear in that?
Well, that's such a much larger policy issue, because there's still lingering doubts, as you know, in this country about the aftermath of 3 Mile Island. But the fact is we've operated safely for those 40 years since. The environmental community still refuses to embrace nuclear power as being green, even though it's carbon free. I think that'll play out though in the next few months, and we see what the administration does with this clean power plan, whether they're going to give nuclear plants more of a leg to stand on. But there's one thing I wanted to tell you about that maybe isn't self-evident to most consumers in America. What the utilities are doing now with their business is they're trying to not just sell you electricity, they want to sell you things like solar panels, like backup generation devices, they want to sell you a Nest thermostat if they can, home energy management systems, and they're getting back in the business they were in at their inception back when Edison started the utilities. They're selling products. Most people don't realize, because we weren't around then, only our grandparents were, but people would go to a store run by the Edison company to buy a washing machine or a refrigerator or electric iron or lamps, because it was those devices that let you buy electricity. If you didn't have this in your home, you weren't a customer. So in some ways, it's a back to the future.
Radio did the same thing.
Yes.
You had to buy a radio in order to listen to the radio, and the people who provided the signal sold you the radio.
So I think some of the forward-looking utilities realize that they can sell just not the electrons over the wire, but they're going to sell you things that will make you use more electrons or use those electrons more efficiently.
Is this revolution good for the consumer or not?
It's great for the consumer long term. I mean, the fact is, every time you buy anything new, whether it's a personal appliance or something large like an HVAC system for your home or your business, every single generation of that is more efficient. I spoke this morning with Secretary Moniz, the Secretary of Energy, and he was noting that just last year, DOE, his department, had 10 rulemakings related to efficiency of products, mundane products, hot water heaters, washing machines. All of these things now in the future will be more efficient. So they will cost people less money to run over the long term.
Ron, you're a very wise man. It's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast.
Thank you. Well,